when you have a better understanding of different people on your team, you're better as a team as a whole. And so when everybody feels like what they have to say and what they bring to the table matters, and that they're equal, it really does something different for a group, and it really brings a real success and a real feeling of being a part of something greater than yourselves.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so when I first started playing, I was the only player of color on the national team that had a starting position. And so it was really interesting for me to be a part of that. But of course, my teammates were always wonderful. We had other players of color on the team, but I was the one that had the starting position, an important role. And so over time, I played 14 years on the national team. So over time, we had a lot of different, ethnicities and a lot of different players and different people from different parts of the world, and some first generation players as well on the team. And so it was absolutely amazing. And over time, after my retirement, I noticed that we had a lot more players of color come through on the team and have starting positions and important roles and really impact the team. And then not only that, but we also had a lot of players that were just, doing their thing and embracing not only the role on the team, but also who they were. And of course, when social media came along, that really made an impact and a real difference. And so now players were able to really market themselves, and people were able to get to know them as human beings, behind the scenes and not just on the pitch. And so over time, you see a lot of different types of players. Some players, they have a really crazy, home life away from the pitch, and other players are, more calm and have more of a subdued lifestyle. And so all those different varieties of things that we're able to see nowadays is just really transformed the team and just how these players are able to market themselves to the individuals and to fans. There's a lot of sports out there where they're predominantly, white. For example, here in the United States, ice hockey right now is on TV, and it's the Stanley Cup playoffs, and the Stanley Cup final is tonight. And in that sport is predominantly white. You don't see a whole lot of players of color. And recently, like the last couple years, the teams that have made it to the final have had a few players of color on their teams. And so I feel like that adds not only to the fan experience to see some players that look like them, on the ice or on the pitch, but also just players from different backgrounds. When you're a fan and you're watching the highest level and they do the personal pieces or the, human interest pieces about these players, about these athletes, it's really intriguing, because I think what it does is it lets people know that they're just like you. And I feel like that's really cool. And in particular, on the women's team now, they had a game recently, and there was a lot of fantastic players playing. And they were young players, they were older, and there was a nice mixture. But also, you just need representation is really important. So I think people are understanding more so than ever that having players on the team and the young girls and boys that can see them and that they look like them and they get inspired by that. And so I feel like it's always better to have different types of people on the team, because people have different skill sets, and it helps the team be more successful in the long run for sure. Absolutely. So if you have a diverse team, you have different roles, you have different positions, you have different angles on how you can do stuff and how you can have success in business in particular. A lot of times people feel that only certain folks can do certain industries. For example, STEM, like being an engineer or being a doctor or being in the technical industries. A lot of times people have an opinion and a vision of what a brilliant person looks like, but the truth is you never know where brilliance can come from. And a lot of times if you give people an opportunity and you expose them to these different things that maybe they haven't been exposed to traditionally, you'd be surprised in how well they catch on and how much they can contribute to the team and to the success of the company. And of course, in sports in particular, you have different backgrounds and different ways of coming up into the world, and also what you bring is you bring a passion that might be a little bit different. And then when you have a better understanding of different people on your team, you're better as a team as a whole. And so when everybody feels like what they have to say and what they bring to the table matters, and that they're equal, it really does something different for a group, and it really brings a real success and a real feeling of being a part of something greater than yourselves. Whew, well, where do I start, right? I mean, mental well-being is so vital. I mean, I've spoken to, hundreds of Fortune 500 companies, different organizations, different groups and associations, and so often when I speak on stage, after my speech, people come up to me and they say, "Hey, thank you for sharing and being vulnerable with us about the struggles you've had with your mental health, because I recently either had a friend that had a difficult time, or they themselves have had some struggles that they're dealing with. Or for example, one father came up to me and he said, my daughter has really been depressed and she's been really struggling, and I never thought about it until you said what you were saying about how she might be struggling in all areas of her life after she got hit, had a head injury or had a concussion." And he's like, "I didn't understand that impact it was having on her." And so, he said to me, he's like, "Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us." And it's important. And in this day and age, in particular in the sporting arena, mental health is got a different priority. It's not taboo anymore. There was a stigma around mental health for the longest time, in particularly in sport, where if you weren't able to handle it mentally, that meant you were weak, or it meant you were unprepared, or you weren't as passionate. But that's actually not the truth. We all have our difficult times, whether you're going through something really hard off the field, like I did, for example, during the 2003, 2004 seasons for the national team. My father was really ill. And, of course, as an athlete and as a human, you bring that stuff onto the pitch with you. And for me to be able to talk about it with my teammates, be able to get the time and the space that I needed to make sure I mourned him properly, was really, really important for me. And I ended up playing incredibly well that Olympic Games after he passed. But if it wasn't for my teammates having an understanding and allowing me to just get through that and talk through it with them, and they were being there for me, it would have been really, really hard. And so I think what's interesting too about it is everybody has their thing. There's always something going on in a person's life that might be difficult for them to handle, and they may be really struggling with it. So I feel like if you're someone who notices something is going on with a friend or a colleague, you're not expected to handle it. You're not expected to fix it. But what you can do is you can listen. And I feel like that's the most important thing. If you realize that somebody in your work or at home or in your community is really struggling with something, all you have to do is listen. It really goes a long way. So for me, I made a lot of impact the first 40 years of my life with my teammates and on the national team, whether it was Olympic team or World Cup team. We made an impact and a ripple effect for millions of young girls and boys and everywhere all over the world. So in this current 40 years of my life, I have basically used speaking as my sport. Speaking is my craft. So when I go into a speech, I prepare properly. I have a meeting with the people who've hired me because I want my speech to be very, very memorable. And for folks, when they see me speak and they hear me speak, that they think to themselves, "Yeah, she was a great speaker. I got something out of that." So I'm very intentional about that. And so when I go into a venue and I'm hired by someone, I am a steward of their confidence. I am a steward of the financial outlay that they did and the faith and trust that they had in me to come to their event and speak and inspire and connect with whoever's in that room. And it's an important thing to me. So I prepare for a speech the same way I used to prepare for a game. What can I control? I want to have the right words to reach the person that I need to reach. And so when I'm done speaking, people feel like, you know what, that hour or however long was worth it. Because so many times in this day and age, from what I'm told, when you have speakers, they're talking about their agendas and they have certain things that they want to discuss. And there's a lot of things that's necessary for. But for me, I want you to see in my journey yourself. Hey, she went through this difficult thing and I'm going through something difficult. And she just said, let me try this or do that. Or, yeah, my friend is really struggling with her mental health. Maybe I can just go and listen. She said, it's important to listen and not try to fix her. I'm just going to go and listen and be a good friend. Or hey, my kid's really struggling with this or that in school. Maybe I could just sit her down and say, hey, honey, tell me what's on your mind, what's on your heart. And so when I go and I speak with people, I want them to be able to take away from that speech something that they can use in their life. And I want them to see a piece of themselves in me. And so that is how I make a bigger impact than I made in the first 40 years of my life in the second 40 years on the stage.